Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever everybody is. Thank you for joining in. Apologies, we were just having a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we will get started. Thank you for joining, and there'll be, I think, more people just coming in as we get going. And I wanted to just welcome everybody on behalf of CitizenScience.Asia. I'm Smriti Safaya. I am one of the members on the leadership team, but I am joined by some of the co-founders with me as well. Scott and Aaron, do you want to just say a word or anything like that?
No, I just want to welcome everyone, really.
Yeah, hello everyone from Hong Kong. Looking forward to this session, and yeah, we can hopefully talk after. Yeah, great.
Yeah, so I was just going to share a little bit about the structure of today's event. And I will just share my screen so you can see what we are going to be talking about. So we have with us two wonderful people who've been working in citizen science for quite a while and at different levels, from very local communities all the way up to policy. So it'll be fantastic to be hearing from both of them. We have Fabien Moustard and we have Martin Brocklehurst. So the idea is that they will each share from their perspectives about particular tools that they are working on and feel are very powerful to be able to get data and use data to make the world a better place. So we'll be hearing from Martin first. He'll be talking about the Aurora app, and then Fabien will be talking about the Kapta platform. And they'll be speaking for about 15-20 minutes each, and we will have about 10 minutes of questions. We will have the speaker speak, and then people can ask questions, and then we'll have the next speaker speak, and then we will have questions after that, and we'll do a little wrap up. But just to start with, wanted to introduce what Citizen Science Asia is, and it is one of the regional platforms for gathering the citizen science community together. And we're trying to build connections, capacity, and have these amazing conversations about how to use this kind of method whereby everyday people can participate and conduct research to get real solutions and answers to questions that matter. And you are more than welcome to jump onto the Citizen Science Asia website, where you can see there is a community button, and so you can join in and share a few details about yourself so that you can stay connected to everything that is happening. And so we just try to bring together as many people and projects about Asian citizen science and be a sharing platform so that we can also help to connect them to larger projects around the world with the different regional groups as well. So we are going to start off with Martin, who's going to be talking about the Aurora app. So I will pass it over to you, Martin, and I'll stop sharing, my screen, and you can share yours now.
Okay. So my name is Martin Brocklehurst. I'm speaking to you today as the chair of the Citizen Science Global Partnership, which is the organization we've put together to enable all the citizen science associations around the world to speak with one voice to global organizations, and in particular the UN. And I'm also speaking to you in relation to my role on the Aurora project, which is about tackling climate change. There we go.
Yeah,
Now it's working.
good.
Okay. I'm going to concentrate on climate change because for me it's the biggest and most important issue that we have to face as a global community, and it's an area where citizen science has not played a great role up until this point of time. And I just thought I'd start with a few general slides. And these were comments that were made in 2018 about the next few years being the most important in our history, and talking about the consequences of 1 degree C of global warming. And here we are in 2025 and nothing's changed. We're still on this downward trajectory for rising temperatures across the planet. And the implications of it are catastrophic in terms of economic cost, as well as damage to human health. And I took this out from yesterday, which is the confirmation that 2025, here we are, moved on from 2018, that 2025 is International Year of Glaciers Preservation. And I just thought I'd pull out the statistics on the Hindu Kush Himalayas, what's known as the Earth's third pole, which is now warming at 3 times faster than the global average. And the prediction is if we carry on at this rate, that 75% of the region's glaciers could be gone by the end of this century. And that has catastrophic effects on about 8 or 9 countries as a direct consequence, reducing water availability, undermining food and energy security, exacerbating biodiversity loss. And if you remember the 2022 Nepal floods that followed on from some of the catastrophic melting of the glaciers in that part of the world, it illustrates the economic and human cost that then follows. And this was published yesterday on 24th of February. And it's not like we haven't been warned across the planet, that we're seeing events taking place that have never happened before. This was some of the events happening in Australia in 2020, when the Great Fires went down into New South Wales. And the governments at the time denying climate change was the cause. And if you see the little quote in the top right-hand corner, I won't say what the local Australian individual commented here, but you can put in the ... dots for yourself. Basically, the government was claiming that these fires had nothing to do with climate change and instructing their civil servants not to refer to climate change when they talked about the fires. I mean, absolutely ludicrous. And here we are, January 2025, and Labour MPs in the UK ordered to sink a landmark climate and environmental bill that was going to enshrine the COP targets that the UK has already agreed to into UK law. So again, even in a country where the MPs and the controlling party now are pretty much on board with the climate change issue, reluctance to get tied legally to the targets they've already agreed. And this is why citizen science is so important when we look at climate change, because it's a different way of delivering on the commitments that countries make. And it's bottom up rather than top down in terms of the way you implement. So that's why Project Aurora for me is so important, because it's exploring how people can take a part in the energy transition and can start to own the climate change problem themselves. And you can find all about the Aurora project on the Aurora website. You just punch in Aurora H 2020 and up will come the details. And I'm going to quickly go through the slides so we leave time for questions. You will have a set of the slides afterwards that you can have a look at in your own good time. The project itself is a pilot. It's trying to prove that citizen science can make a difference in climate change mitigation, tackling carbon pollution. It's across 5 countries in Europe. It's got a series of strands of activities, but at its heart are 2 issues. Recognizing that 30% of all carbon emissions come from the decisions that we take in the way that we heat and power homes and in the transport decisions that we take. If you put on top of that the purchase decisions that people make, then the actual percentage of carbon emissions that would be impacted would rise to between 50 to 70%. So individuals can make a huge difference to reducing carbon emissions. And my argument would be you cannot deliver the targets that governments are setting unless you engage with citizens to start to change their own personal behaviors. The second big strand is that citizens can take a part in the energy transition. They can start to own aspects of the energy transition and benefit financially from it as well, and also offset the carbon emission benefits that flow against their own personal carbon footprint. So we're concentrating on the 4 universities and 1 municipality. And this is an example from one of the universities that's now got a fully operational energy community in operation as part of the program. It's the University of Aarhus. And here we've managed to bring together the citizen scientists in the university, the students, the staff, the cooks, the cleaners, the people living around the university who now own the energy community for this university. They've convinced the university hierarchy and the building owners, and they have a strange structure in Denmark where the buildings are independently owned from the university, to allow them to install renewable energy schemes on the rooftops of the buildings to replace the fossil fuel gas source heating and cooling that would have been used in the buildings in the initial instance. And the way the scheme works is that the energy community is a registered NGO in Denmark. They now sell the electricity that they produce to the university at below the market price, so the university benefits. They reward their investors with payback that is greater than you would get from a bank, so the investors benefit. And the investment can be as little as 20 euros. So students, instead of buying a pint of beer, can buy a share in the cooperative scheme for the university. And they've used support services from engineers, from lawyers, to basically ensure that the installation is engineeringly sound, strategically, structurally sound. They're experimenting with different types of monofacial and bifacial solar panels. They're integrating the whole exercise into the teaching curriculum at the university. So this is not just about installing renewable energy, it's a whole university approach, where the whole learning process that comes from this can be built into your teaching programs in engineering, in the whole environmental debate, in mathematics, and a whole range of disciplines. And the next one. And then, of course, because they've put in different types of panels, they can do research on the effectiveness of the panels. And this is in a country where, when we started the program, many of the local people living in Aarhus were saying, solar panels don't work in Denmark. It's too far north. It's too cold. Utter nonsense. But it's part of the problem that we've got with the energy transition, in the sense that there are so many myths that need to be broken before you can actually make progress. And here, now ordinary people are part of that energy transition. And this is the way that is then linked to the Aurora Energy Tracker app, which is an app that's available you can download from any of the major sources of apps on the cloud. And the app itself enables you to track your own personal carbon footprint for heating, lighting, and transport decisions. And then we're linking the example from Denmark as a way of offsetting the benefits that flow from switching to renewable energy from fossil fuels onto your own personal app, and give you further discounts on your carbon footprint. And of course, on the Aarhus University, they're now tracking the energy production, and this is real-time energy production. It can be picked up on the app. You can see how much money you're generating. You can see how much energy you're generating and how much carbon that you're saving. And each of the pilot areas will be linked in the same way. A different business model employed at Ljubljana University in Slovenia. Here, the university wouldn't take part in an energy community directly. It wouldn't allow them to fund the installation, because the legislation from the EU that allows this to take place hadn't been transposed back into Slovenian law. So to get around the problem, the university are investing in the solar photovoltaics, but it's still a one university approach, where the learning is being built into the teaching curriculum at the university. There is an energy club that is running the program on behalf of the university, and working through the whole logistics of installing these photovoltaics on the roof of the buildings. And again, in a country where in the winter there are snows in Ljubljana, so it's not a traditional hot climate. This is a very mixed climate. And again, it's showing major economic advantage to the university. And again, they're experimenting with a whole range of technologies, as you'd expect scientists to do at the university. And then the university energy community is tracking the performance and learning from the whole process. And again, all this is documented on the Aurora website. Go to Spain. This is a much warmer country. You would expect the university to embrace the whole concept of an energy community, but wrong. The administration in the university have put up all sorts of barriers as to why they shouldn't enter into energy communities for that particular university, even though it's that university that's driving the whole program. And so one of the nonsenses that we've got at the moment is that there is resistance to change. So the pilot project here has stepped outside the university and gone to the local schools in Madrid to see if they can apply the same thinking to the junior schools and the comprehensive schools. And again, they found a school near the university where they've set up now a dedicated energy community. that's going to install heat pumps and solar panels to replace the fossil fuel energy supplies. They're looking to raise 150,000 euros in investment monies from the staff, the students, the surrounding communities, and working with something called ECU, which is a solar cooperative in Spain, which reduces some of the risks associated with the program. And again, it's a whole school approach. And here the school children celebrating the launch of the scheme. They've already raised 70,000 and are on their way to 100,000 euros, all small scale investments. This is not major money investments. This is the community coming together to self-fund the transition. And just imagine every school in Madrid doing this, what the impact would be on their local communities, on the school children, and the impact it would have in accelerating the change to renewable energy. Last example from the UK. This is a school in the Forest of Dean, an old coal mining area. It's an area that suffers great social deprivation. And again, the same approach. And here they're working with something called the Big Solar Cooperative for a major comprehensive school, which is all the legal documents are now signed. And the installation of the solar photovoltaics will take place this summer. And then in the adjoining leisure centre that was under threat of closure because of the energy costs associated with keeping it warm is also joined the scheme, and that will go live again during the summer period. And again, the offer is that in all these cases, none of the capital cost falls to the building owner. That falls to the investment community that's been put together to fund the installation. And in the case of the UK, Big Solar Cooperative not only raise the funding for the community energy scheme from the local area, but they make it available across the whole of the UK. So you can draw in funding from the whole of the country to fund the installation of this transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And in this case, it's something like 10% cheaper, the power that's obtained from renewable energy than from fossil fuels. And it's something in the order of 5 to 10% more in terms of the investment return than you would get from a bank. So obviously these things will vary over time, but it really is a win-win. Lower energy costs, the money returned to the investors, still some money left over for the next cooperative scheme to go forward, and no capital cost to the building owner. And it's such an attractive scheme. In the UK case, it's now expanding quite rapidly. Other parts of the Forest of Dean are coming on board to the community energy scheme. And this is an example from a 17th century hunting lodge in the center of what was the Royal Forest of Dean. It's very iconic. The fact that they've joined has raised eyebrows all across the Forest of Dean. And other installations, public buildings, something like 30 to 40, are queuing up to take part in the program with the Big Solar Cooperative. Let me lastly move to Portugal, where again we have the same resistance from the university in setting up an energy community. So in this particular case, the group have worked with the university not to set up an energy community per se, to actually build and construct renewable energy on the educational establishments, but to work with the university to enable the schemes that they can put together and fund from outside the central area of the city and outside this yellow line, because within the yellow line, this is a UNESCO heritage site, and they're not allowed to put photovoltaics on the rooftops of the buildings in an effective way. So what they're doing here is they're generating the power from buildings outside the UNESCO area and then exporting it through the grid and reselling it to buildings within the UNESCO area. And again, that's a really nice different business model to be developing to show you how people can get involved in the energy transition. And it then would affect every other historic city around the world as a business model that could be followed. Just an example of how energy communities are growing in Europe. Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, the UK are the biggest areas that are accelerating away. But some of the other countries like Greece, which have enormous potential for this type of approach, have yet to begin their major journey. And come to Asia Pacific, the opportunities are endless to do this in the Asia Pacific region because of the solar opportunities that you've got in your part of the world. Let me then link you back to the app. This is the Aurora app. This is about helping citizens get to net zero emissions. so that they can change the way they heat, the power, they cool, or the transport decisions that they take. It uses algorithms behind the app itself that are specific to individual countries. It's been designed to be able to be used across the whole of the European Union. It's an open source app using the UNESCO open source science principles. So anybody can access the code. And we're putting together a guide that will allow any other country around the world to modify the app and put in your own local data and build your own local algorithms to allow it to be used anywhere else in the world. And that will be going live later this year. We've proven the app, we've proven it works, we've proven the links work with energy communities. And then we also link it to something called a labeling scheme, which is a bit like the idea of energy efficiency in your kettle. It basically tells you on your journey towards net zero where you are as an individual in a very simple way. And I'll show you now very quickly. There's the labeling scheme from A to G. And each of these is designed around the specific knowledge of the energy consumption in the countries that are using the labeling scheme. Again, it's open source, can be modified to suit any other country around the world. And it helps citizens to know whether they're a G, which is a groundbreaker, you've started your journey, or whether you've reached A+, which is you've hit the top target, you are very close to net zero, and you are a major accomplisher in this transition to net zero. And just to show you how it works in a bit more detail, this is some actual data. It's my data, so I can share it with you without any problem at all. And it basically shows you that for heating and power, I've reached the A+ level. I'm practicing what I preach in terms of getting to net zero carbon. But for transport, boy, I've hardly begun my journey. I'm still at G. So I delved into what was going on here. And what came out was that the flying I do to promote the citizen science movement and to promote the whole idea of citizen science and climate change was actually creating major problems for my carbon footprint. If you take out my business flights and then you look at the transport decisions that I take from a personal point of view for my family, I go back up to A+ accomplisher. So the message for me was do more to reduce your flying associated with the work that you do with the citizen science movement wherever you can, and where you can't, go for offsetting with the airline companies. And everybody who's used the app has found the same problem. As soon as you start flying anywhere around the world, you really do begin to understand the impact that that is having on your own personal carbon footprint. Okay, so what are you going to do as a result of me talking to you about this particular program? What I want to suggest to you is that we're no longer on the brink of a technological revolution, we're in it. But it fundamentally alters the way that we live, work, and relate to one another. And that the possibilities of billions of people connected by mobile devices with unprecedented processing power, storage capacity, and access to knowledge are unlimited. It's what makes, for me, citizen science the future. And so the comments like we didn't have a way of accessing information on a global scale have gone. It's now possible to put 1 million people together doing world water monitoring, put 1,000 projects together on diversity. And we can start to understand the value of what citizen science brings to this debate. In biodiversity alone, it's been estimated to be $2.5 billion. And if you talk to the people who run the Global Biological Information Facility, GBIF, based in Copenhagen, they'll tell you for biodiversity alone now, something like 60% of all the data in the national data set is coming from citizen scientists. The attribution is not great at the moment. It's not very visible, but that's the journey that we've been on for biodiversity. Now, have another look at this example. This is the Global Mosquito Observation Dashboard. This is where citizen scientists around the world have come together to agree some standard methodologies for monitoring the changing populations of mosquitoes, which are fundamental to tackling the diseases, the vectors that they carry. This dashboard went live in November. It was mainly around America, Europe, and Australia, and you can see it's gone global. And the speed at which this is accelerating is quite stunning. And it shows you the power of being able to get common global systems for citizen science. And it's the encouragement it gives people to take part. And we haven't yet moved from just identifying the species to then the health impacts that come from those individual species migrating around the planet. And the last bit of news I had from this was that one of the species in Asia has now crossed to Africa for the first time and has been picked up by citizen scientists, and it's a disease vector carrying mosquito. So this is really powerful stuff. Now imagine doing that for climate change. Imagine doing that for pollution, for air pollution, which is a global problem. And you can see the potential power that this has in illustrating how citizens can drive change. So with that in mind, the global citizen science movement is trying to push the idea that citizen science should be more than just research. It should be embedded in the way that we deliver legislation, the way we deliver environmental legislation. In this case here, it's within Europe. So we're arguing with the European community, the European Commission, that when they write legislation, they should write it in a form that builds citizen science into the delivery of that mechanism, delivery of that legislation. Because again, environmental legislation is only as good as its enforcement and delivery. And at the moment, we all know it's very easy to write laws that are not implemented on the ground. What citizen science helps you do is to drive that implementation on the ground. So that's the first example from Europe. So what else could you be doing to help us in this process? Well, the first one would be to join the Aurora program as an ambassador to spread the message about how citizen science can help in tackling climate change. And we're planning to have our first ambassadors meeting in March of this year. And we've got something like 150 ambassadors now signed up, including people who have been the ex-chief scientist of UNEP, right down to students working on these energy communities in the universities themselves. So academics, policymakers, and ordinary people getting involved as ambassadors to promote this idea. Second thing is join the LinkedIn discussion group, Citizen Science and Climate Change, and share your thinking, share your ideas around the planet about what is possible with citizen science and climate change. And there's been a really nice paper in this respect put together by the Stockholm Environment Institute, looking at what's going on in research on citizen science and climate change that you can draw on. And I'm sure Smriti will be able to pass that on to you. But they only identified 10 programs that were looking at this area. So there's a real opportunity to open up this whole debate. So the time for talking's over, the time for actions is here. As citizens, we can trailblaze to get to net zero carbon emissions in our own personal lives. So have a look at the Aurora app. So have a think about how you might promote it in Asia, how you might modify it so that it's suitable for your culture, your language, and your climate. And look at the guidance that will come out from Aurora later this year on what the costs are of making that change and what the changes are that you need to make to the Aurora app. And then we have an exploitation plan, and I won't go through the whole of this. You can look at this in your own leisure, but there's a whole series of events this year which are ultimately targeted at trying to impact COP30 and UNEA 7 to say citizen science deserves to be in the delivery plans for multilateral environmental agreements. It deserves to be in the national delivery plans for COP, for the climate change COPs. Start thinking about how you build bottom up with the programs you put in place instead of always top down. And there is a charter now for citizen science and multilateral environmental agreements that is trying to show member states and the UN the way to do this. And it builds on an experience that was taken in America under the Obama administration on how you build citizen science into federal legislation in the US. And so we have the mechanisms, we have the guidance on how it can be done. We now need to build the support from member states attending UNEA 7 to deliver on this when they write the resolutions at the UN. So for me, the decade of citizen science is here. Be part of it, get involved. There's going to be a delegation of citizen science to UNEA 7. There'll be a call shortly asking for people who can come to UNEA. I'm sorry, but the funding for this has to be self-generated. We don't have a lot of money yet in the citizen science community to fund that sort of trip. But for those who can find the funding from within their university or from local sponsors, you'll be really welcome to join the delegation to UNEA 7 in December. And all of this because we only have one planet on which to live. It's why I get so passionate about global citizen science. It's the only inhabitable planet for 6.4 billion kilometers on which we can survive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for quite a tour across Europe, but also even into space in a way. We have a few questions. I'm also conscious of time, and I'm thinking that maybe we might save the questions for after Fabien shares his talk as well.